And very good evening to you and welcome to Newsline Live. My guest this evening is the legal eagle and supporter of the NPP, Mr. Harshana Nanakara. Very good evening to you, Harshana.
Good evening, Faraz.
Now then, I just wanted to ask you, an advertisement in the local press, and it says here, it's all about the Colombo Port City, of course, because that is where the level of interest and the public's attention is currently, although there is the other matter of the COVID-19 too. But here we go. The claim, Colombo Port City isn't governed by the laws of the land, and the advertisement says the CPC is governed by Sri Lankan law, subject to exemptions designed to improve the ease of doing business given the nature of the special economic zone, similar to BOI and other economic zones around the country. True, false, or in between?
Partly true, partly not telling the correct picture.
Right.
Because if you look at it, if you look at Section 68F of the Act, it says the Commission is empowered to do a couple of things. One is to make regulations.
Right.
That is the one which has to be presented before Parliament for approval.
Right.
But they can issue codes, guidelines and directions. Through them also you can make rules and laws inside the port city, which doesn't have to be presented to the Parliament. If you look at Section 71(4) of the Act, you will see only regulations need to be placed before the Parliament. And the best part is, if you violate any of those codes, rules or guidelines
issued by the Commission,
then that person is committing a criminal offence which is punishable before a court of law in this country. Okay?
Right.
So what does that say? Only our Parliament has the authority and the power to make rules and laws. And when they delegate, the provincial council and local authorities can.
But not the
Commission.
Not the Commission.
So then it's one of the things. Either this provision is unconstitutional, or it's a separate country. So they can make their own rules. Because those codes and guidelines, that's why I said advertisement, partly true, partly not telling the truth. Because these codes, guidelines and directions does not have to be placed before the Parliament.
Now, if as indeed they claim that Parliament will have its oversight, then what happens, the way we understand it, either the President or the Minister in charge of the subject, if there is one appointed, can gazette the codes and regulations put forth by the Commission. And thereafter, within 3 months, Parliament shall debate it or look at it.
Within 3 months they have to give their approval law.
Or not. But isn't the danger where the Parliament says, no, we want this rescinded, and indeed it will be rescinded, but what happens to the acts done in between that time?
According to this Act, if there's any act being done before the rescinding takes place, those things cannot be undone. They will remain as done. Now, even in the BOI Act, you have similar provisions, but the danger now, you remember the sugar scam, the gazettes were only for about a day or two. Thereafter the entire damage was done. So yes, that provision is there. Whatever was done, it cannot be undone. It will remain valid.
Right.
And also, I think in your question you said that they are going to put forward through the minister. Remember, they say if ever a minister is appointed.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
So only then he will be answerable to Parliament.
Right.
And again, by this law, he is not bound to put before the Parliament, even if he is there, codes or guidelines or directions.
So if there's no minister, then it's just the President, and the President is not accountable to Parliament?
I mean, he's not in the Parliament to answer the Parliament, according to our Constitution. So it's run by the the commissioners appointed and the President.
So it sounds to me, or it seems to me, that when they want to, there is a separation of powers, but at other times there is a blur between the separation of powers between the executive and the legislature.
After the 20th Amendment, that's when the real blurring started. Because if you really look at it, the 20th Amendment brings the power straight to the hands of the President, and that's why with that 2/3 majority, an act like this also is going to go through. It will go through. The only safety we have is the Supreme Court
the last
declaring
bastion of hope.
Last bastion of hope, not our Parliament. They will rubber stamp anything that put forward by the government.
Isn't that a crying shame?
That's true, very true. But I mean, you see the Parliament. they will raise their hand. Even those people who are now in the government objecting to this, I heard some voices from the government benches, even they might raise their hand in the end. Remember what happened to the 20th Amendment? How many government MPs criticized the features of it?
But okay, but there are a couple of people who whose parties sort of voted with the government, but the leaders themselves didn't. And now I find that the leaders are in some form of, in a spot of trouble, in a spot of bother.
Well, yes.
Will that make, what do you think? In your suspicious mind?
In my suspicious mind, it's like this. Now, we know there were two parties.
Yeah.
Both the leaders did not vote for the 20th Amendment, but made sure 4 from each party voted. So, look here, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but now one of them these days, Mr. Badruddin, is in remand. So, how will his mind work?
Well, his mind surely will be that he needs to secure his freedom.
Probably then his ministers should vote for the port cities, isn't it? The ones who are inside the parliament.
If it is linked, but we don't know.
We do not know if it is linked.
We don't know that. So it's just, we're just only reflecting what some public sentiment is on that issue. You know. So all right, but. What are now, Hashina Nanakaro, tell me, what are the, I mean, we need the port city.
Definitely.
And so on.
Definitely.
You know, it's the way forward.
Definitely.
But what is it? Is it paradise or is it something else?
No, I mean, basically, now
is
first and foremost, right now what we have, the draft is a fantasy island, not a financial center, but a fantasy island.
Right.
Right. Even, bottom line is this. We have to attract FDIs. We have to attract investors. Yes, we have to give them concessions and various incentives. For that purpose, we do have 2 laws already in place, the Strategic Development Act and the BOI Act. In both, you can attract investors and give them their tax benefits, because nobody is going to invest if they're not going to make a profit out of it. But here the problem is, this entire act is designed, despite they keep on repeatedly using words in the interest of the national economy, in the interest of the domestic market, the reality is somewhat different. What we are trying to do, actually what should be done, is bring this under the purview of the parliament. Now, you say, now we are going to earn, that's the thing that out in know, that we are going to earn so much of money, right, which will be remitted to the consolidated fund of run under the parliament. But again, these monies initially will be collected in a separate fund in the port city. And only 1% of that, whatever the revenue, after deducting the expenditure and promotional material and everything, promotions, every 3 months they have to deduct this 1%.
Right.
Let's say. But then, who's going to make sure what amount the port city received and whether we are getting the right share? So if you are really concerned about the country benefiting out of this port city, shouldn't our Auditor General be empowered to look into the accounts of
and you say
the
that
Commission?
It's not.
It is not in the Act. The Act has barred our Auditor General from carrying out any audits. So how can you be sure that these monies received are correct? If you look at it, Faraz, even state corporations and departments which are under the auditor, who gets audited by the auditor, I mean, look at the amount of corruption and waste that takes place there, even when there is supervision by the auditor. Now, without our Sri Lankan Auditor General looking into it, how can you make sure that these monies will be actually received by the country? So this is where the problem lies in this act. And also, I mean, you know that sections empowers for foreign commissioners.
Yes.
I mean, it could be members of the Communist Party for all we know, because the president can appoint whomever he wants, whom he thinks is suitable for the job. So,
and that is a very valid concern.
Extremely valid, because if you look at the BOI Act, Board of Investment Act, the Urban Development Authority Act, you will see to be a commissioner or an officer of the commission under the Urban Development Authority Act, and I believe it's, if I'm not mistaken, the BOI Act. The BOI Act and the border, the commissioners have to be Sri Lankan. All officers have to be Sri Lankan. The moment they're not Sri Lankan, they're disqualified from holding a post. You and I already know, thanks to the bond scam, what will happen if a foreign national is holding a post here. because we can't get them to be accountable.
Is allowed to leave the country.
Yes. Here, here it's a very dangerous situation where the president will appoint. If you look at the BOI Act, president can remove any commissioner, right, without even assigning a reason for it. That's how much powerful the president is. But in this act, section 9(3), there are conditions the president has to follow in order to remove a commissioner. I'm telling you, this is not right, because we can't let that happen, because this mass of land is not under any local authority of the Colombo municipality. It's not under the Western Province. But this commission is even empowered to sell land inside it for condominium parcels. They don't even have to consult the president. Remember, land is a subject of the provincial councils. You need the permission of the provincial councils. But here,
so doesn't this act have to go through the provincial councils?
I think so, because some of the sections which are affecting the provincial council list according to the 13th Amendment, you need the consent of the provincial council, especially with regard to land. They can sell the land freehold, not just lease.
So 1% of that will accrue to
their revenue,
to the commission.
After deducting all the expenditure, 1% gets accrued to our consolidated fund, which is under the parliament.
Right. So, but is that only applicable just to our part of the marketable land, or is it available?
Not very clear, but I believe it is not just for the sale of land, but even the businesses that takes place afterwards. The revenue, general revenue.
1% will
according to that,
So that's not too much of a bad thing.
Well, it's a good thing, provided we know that we are actually getting that amount.
Right.
But our Auditor General can't audit any of the port city accounts. It can only be done by...
No, that's bad news.
Well, I mean, if we can't supervise, how do we know what we are getting? So that's why they say all economy, everything, but it's not going to work like that.
We need to address this issue.
Definitely, and also, I mean, if you look at it, there are other provisions. No, in this matter, you will see that you see, nobody sees this does not only affect the port area. No?
Yeah.
As an interim measure, these investors can invest anywhere outside the port city within Sri Lanka for 5 years from the time of coming into operation of this act. And they get all the tax concessions and incentives to carry on business outside the port city area.
I don't think that's very fair on Sri Lankan industrialists and
I mean,
investors.
the small scale businessman and the medium scale is going to suffer, because he will give products or services at a far lesser price because their overheads are low. And you think our businesses can stand such an onslaught? And not only that, Section 37 says...
But these corporates who are sort of registered in the port city under that act will have an unfair advantage over the Sri Lankan incorporated companies.
Definitely, because they are exempted from paying taxes and there are a lot of incentives, so they can produce a service or a commodity far cheaper than a local businessman. And then they will capture the market completely.
And that sounds like an unfair trading practice, and it doesn't do justice to this the claim in the Constitution that we are all equal before the law.
This actually Article 12 of the Constitution gets violated regularly in this act, in my personal view. But it's funny, I mean, even that particular section, there's another section, Section 37, which is not even an interim measure. If you can get hold of a local citizen or a permanent resident, they can apply to the Commission to do business outside the port city area. So that means it's a permanent measure, right? They can do business outside provided they have a citizen or a permanent resident. So if there's a Chinese man who's a permanent resident here, with him they can do a business anywhere in Sri Lanka outside the port city.
But it doesn't specify what sort of shareholding it should be.
No, it doesn't. It just said as a partner. So as a person.
Even 0.01 is
basically this is allowing the Chinese to come into the country and compete for a share of the local market, and this will be the end of small and medium scale entrepreneur. This is why we are objecting.
That's politically dynamite.
I mean, look at it. I'm just reading the sections. Today I'm not playing the role of a politician. I'm simply being a lawyer and telling you what's there in the law and how it's going to happen. And the best part is this: when they're saying Section 37, which permits the engaging business outside Sri Lanka, they say an authorized person may subject to the applicability of all written laws for the time being in force and regulations which may be made thereunder in the national interest and in order to safeguard the interest of the domestic economy. Apply to the Commission for an authorization to engage in business in Sri Lanka with the citizens of Sri Lanka or resident outside the area of the authority. See the words, in the interest of the national economy, domestic economy.
Those are all sweet sounding words.
This entire act, Faraz, is a sugar-coated pill of cyanide. Sugar-coated.
Sugar-coated indeed, and that's the way the Colombo Port City bill is being looked at by some. Let's find out further details after this little peek at the headlines for tonight's primetime news from News First.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.
Welcome back to Newsline Live. I'm in conversation with Mr. Harshan Ananiakara, Legal Eagle, and we're discussing, of course, the Colombo Port City bill. Compulsory arbitration, it says here. Just let's get it right. Ordinarily, how does it work? If you have a dispute, do you first go to arbitration and then go to court? Or how does it work?
Well, how it works is that provided the two parties consent, it's nothing uncommon. We even have in commercial contracts or consultancy contracts, or two parties can always agree that in the event of a dispute, you go to arbitration instead of a court. That will avoid the delay and the time and whatever the costs involved. But rule number one, both parties must consent.
So it is a mutually agreed
It's a mutually agreed thing, failing which they go to court. But
in here?
It's different. 60-1, they talk about this International Commercial Dispute Resolution Center, right? It says if there's a dispute between a commission and an authorized person, an employee of an authorized person, or commission and a resident or an occupier, shall be resolved by way of arbitration. Shall, that is mandatory. That is mandatory. They don't have a choice in the matter.
So they are on purpose doing away with relying on Sri Lanka's law.
Exactly. Indirectly, what's happening here is when you say shall be resolved, that means only authorized persons can do business within the port city.
So it's just Hobson's choice, just one.
Yeah. When you sign the contract, that will be there. So there's no consent. So when you make by law something like that compulsory, for that limited purpose, you are ousting the Sri Lankan jurisdiction. This is why when they keep on saying this is land of Sri Lanka and the Sri Lankan law applies, look at that advert.
Yeah.
In a very tactful way, some certain things have been avoided.
Right.
And recently, one of our own MPs, Dr. Harni Amarasuriya, in a press conference, she said that the Chinese embassy has made arrangements for parliamentarians to go and see the port city.
Why is the Chinese embassy doing that?
If it's part of Sri Lankan landmass, what has the Chinese embassy got to do with it? This is why I told you, be very, very careful with this paper advert and what it claims. So, if it's our land, why should the Chinese embassy organize
the
tours?
UDA could do that.
UDA could do that.
Because
So
it's now vested in the
These
UDA,
are the
isn't it?
things. I mean, whether it's constitutional or not is something the court will decide.
Yeah.
But whether something is good or not, that's why we have a government to decide on that. So the public must not be misled with this sugar-coated cyanide pills that is being thrown at us.
It says here, one of our viewers is saying there's no point talking about it because when I open my lips, let no dog bark. So you know, the public seem to be losing faith that everything is sort of just slipping away, and all accountability processes and the usual due process is all being done away with. It is surely, but certainly being eroded.
Definitely, I can't agree with that viewer more, because with the arrival of the 20th Amendment, right, the separation of powers got eroded. The due process, rule of law, I mean, things we have discussed here. That Commission on Political Victimization, trying to bypass the judicial system. And then we have Parliament who act like hooligans and who refuse to disclose their educational qualifications, and who does not even run the country. They're just there to make a buck.
To be able to disclose something, it follows really that the basic premise is that you must have something to disclose.
I'm sure there are a few educated people there and professional, not that there aren't any.
No.
At least our three, we have one PhD and two bachelors. But what I'm trying to say is that that's why you lose faith, because they know no matter what you do, they're going to lift their hand to this port city. You see, now whether it's constitutional or not is what's going to court decide now.
Yeah.
Now I'm sure long time ago when Don Juan Dharmapala gave Kotte Kingdom in a deed of gift to the Portuguese, it would have been constitutional then. What's happening here? Akin to that, because the powers enjoyed by the commissioners under this are so wide. Actually, I love reading history, so you remember the VOC, the East India Company?
Yes.
How they used to have a business monopoly in certain given areas. These fellows are having similar powers. I mean, that's what I feel. So
sort of unparalleled, untrammeled powers.
Untrammeled. And also, if you look at section 63, it says when there are certain financial transactions or commercial or civil disputes, which has to be heard within our court system, if it's relating to the port city, must be given priority. That means their divorce cases, their commercial disputes must be given priority and must be heard on a day-to-day basis. What about Sri Lankan citizens? We are the ones who are paying taxes.
So is it fair to say that Sri Lanka's citizens are being pushed into second place now?
Definitely. That is because this act, yes, it's a part of a strategical development, but this is China's strategy for One Belt, One Road initiative. This is not a part of the Sri Lankan strategy. The part of the Chinese strategy, what we are catering for.
So in short, also, for want of a better phrase, this bill, when it becomes an act, goes some way towards creating a different class of person, which of course the Sri Lanka Constitution does not recognize. Sri Lanka's Constitution recognizes only the one class of person, the citizen of Sri Lanka.
Well, here then the question arises, is Port City a part of Sri Lanka? That means, you know, as per 148 of the Article 148 of the Constitution, the financial power is with the Parliament to determine the unit of money. Within the port city, in two sections, they are referring to the rupee. That is, you can buy goods and services and recreation for Sri Lankan rupees and paying of salaries. All the other instances, the act is quiet, which means it has to be either dollars or probably yuan, right?
Well, anything other than Sri Lanka.
Other rupees. So how can Parliament have authority over that? That mass land, which is not even part of this, which might not even have a minister who's answerable to the Parliament. Unless this act, they change it drastically, we are creating an entity which can function on its own.
What about the time-tested method usually used by governments of recent where they say, oh yes, we'll adjust that all at the committee stage?
Now that's the deadly part, because some certain things get added at the committee stage and some certain things don't. If we had, I mean, your viewer was very concerned about the Parliament. If we had a Parliament with a conscience and with some knowledge on what they do, at least they can argue and prevent this, because most of these clauses, Faraz, need 2/3, right? I mean, this is why from election platforms, we are screaming out loud saying, don't give anyone 2/3 majority. You don't need to give that. So, but all these fellows will raise their hand, but I mean, few people might be getting the perks, but the country will have to pay very badly.
Of course, we need to make a slight correction. Mr. Rishad Badiuddin is not in remand, but he is under detention.
Right.
So thank you for that clarification. By the way, another viewer has pointed out that the port city has no cemetery.
Very interesting. Not only a cemetery. Now, there's no provision as to how they're going to get water, waste management, right? Their transport, people have to get there to transport, no? Right? Now, they will have to rely for power, energy, transport and waste management on the Colombo municipality our transport service, okay, and our water and our electricity from our hydropower turbines or the diesel ones. But they are not paying taxes. People who are working there are exempted from taxes. So that means all those services.
They'll have to pay a premium.
We are the ones who are paying taxes.
But they'll have to pay a premium to take that into account.
For what? They have, I mean, there's no, I don't know whether there will be provisions for what I said. But from what I gather so far, they will be relying on the Sri Lankan structure, transport, waste management, water and electricity, for which we as taxpayers pay and they are exempted. It's like we are feeding the cow and they are getting the milk.
That's a wonderful analogy. Harshan Ranekara, thank you very much for your time on Newsline Live. We do appreciate that. And tonight, of course, you can have there's an all-on debate on Face the Nation about the Port City Bill, starting soon after the primetime news at 9:30, hosted by Shamir Rasuddin. We have a great panel, and it's bound to be an interesting debate. So do catch that on TV1 at 9:30, soon after the primetime news. In the meantime, Harshan Ranekara, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that.
And that's the way it was on Newsline Live. Take care, have a great evening ahead of you, and as always, God bless you.